Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are in the fantasy trip today. This will continue the combat videos that I was doing for the fantasy trip. We will be looking at hand-to-hand combat and seeing how those rules apply in the labyrinth. Here we go. If you have the book, we will be on page 116. Hand-to-hand combat. A figure may move into an enemy's figure's hex, initiating a hand-to-hand combat. If A, the enemy has his back to the wall, or is lying down, prone, or kneeling, or B, the enemy has a lower movement allowance, or C, the attacker comes in from the rear, or D, the enemy agrees to hand-to-hand combat. Initiating hand-to-hand combat is considered an attack. To initiate hand-to-hand combat, a figure moves into the enemy's hex. If the attacking figure is disengaged, this is a regular move. If the attacking figure is engaged, he may shift into the figures engaging him to attempt hand-to-hand combat, even if he is engaged with other figures as well. When you're surrounded by foes, sometimes the best thing you can do is jump on one of them. If the attacker had a dagger or main gaunch ready, he may use it in hand-to-hand combat. Otherwise, he drops his readied weapon / shield in the hex he came from and attacks barehanded. When a figure is attacked in hand-to-hand, it immediately, that is, still in the movement phase, rolls one die to determine its defense against the hand-to-hand attack as follows. On a 1 or a 2, by one die they mean 1d6. On a 1 or a 2, the defender drops his readied weapon and or shield, unless the weapon is a main gaunch or a dagger, and fights barehanded. Both fall to the ground in the defender's hex. On a 3 or a 4, the defender drops his readied weapon and or shield, but has time to ready his dagger. If he has one, he will be able to use it in his next attack. Both figures fall to the ground in the defender's hex. On a 5, the defender does not drop his weapon, and the attacker immediately backs up to the hex from which he entered the defender's hex. Hand-to-hand combat does not take place. On a 6, the defender does not drop his weapon and automatically hits the attacker. This hit happens immediately. The defender can still make an attack or take another action on that turn. The attacker must retreat one hex as above. Hand-to-hand combat does not take place. If the attacker jumped the defender from behind, or if the defender is unarmed and does not have an unarmed combat skill, ignore a 6 and roll again. Since figures in hand-to-hand combat are on the ground and or grappling with their foes, they always get a +4 rear hex dex adjustment. A figure on the ground beneath a large figure may elect to attack hand-to-hand rather than trying to escape. In this case, the large enemy does not get a roll to determine his defense. Neither must he fall to the ground himself. The small figure is fighting hand-to-hand, but the larger one may continue to stand and fight normally. Otherwise, though, figures in hand-to-hand are assumed to be on the ground. During the combat phase, hand-to-hand combat is rolled for like any other combat. Figures do bare hands or dagger damage according to their strength, as described below. A figure may attempt to draw a dagger by picking the option and making a dex roll on 3 dice. So where's the strength table? I want to go over the strength table so you're aware. Here it is. You're aware of how much damage they can do. If you have a strength of 8 or less, your unarmed damage, your hand-to-hand damage, is 1d6 minus 4. Your strength is 9 to 10, it's 1d6 minus 3. 11 to 12, it's 1d6 minus 2. 13 to 14, 1d6 minus 1. 15 or 16, it's 1d6. 17 to 20 is 1d6 plus 1. Now, When a fighter uses a dagger or cestus in hand-to-hand combat, the damage done is also based on the table above, so what we just talked about. A fighter using a dagger, cestus, or main gaunch does the damage appropriate to the strength above on the table, plus 3. So a fighter with a strength of 9 using a dagger in hand-to-hand would do 1d6 damage. When a fighter using a club in regular combat, damage done is also ruled by the above table. Add 3 to the damage shown above for a one-handed club or 4 for a two-handed maul, used by a fighter of a given strength. A giant with a strength of 35 with a one-handed club would do 2d6 plus 4 damage when he hit. Okay. Pinning a foe. A figure in hand-to-hand combat against a single foe may attempt to wrestle or judo-type pin. If he succeeds, the enemy will be held helpless for 2 turns. On each succeeding turn, he gets a 4d6 strength roll to break free unless the pinner is stronger than he is, in which case he is held fast. An attempt to pin is made instead of a normal attack. The attacker rolls a basic 3 dice modified as follows. For dexterity, half the difference in dexterity, round down, is added to the die roll if the attacker has lower dex than his foe, and subtracted if the attacker's dex is higher. For instance, if your dex is 4 greater than your foe's, subtract 2 from your roll when you try to pin him. And the lower your dex is, the more likely you are to succeed, and that's why they're doing that. For unarmed combat skill, if either or both figure have unarmed combat talent, modify the number of dice rolled according to the difference in talent. For example, if the attacker has unarmed combat 4 and the defender has unarmed combat 3, the attacker is 1 level better. He rolls 1 less dice. If the attacker has unarmed combat 3 and the defender has unarmed combat 5, the attacker rolls 2 more dice. Obviously, a skill level much greater than your opponent's almost guarantees a successful pin. A character cannot attempt a pin unless he has no readied weapon and is hand-to-hand with a single foe. It is quite possible for 2 figures to try to pin each other on the same turn. The one with the higher dex acts first and is the attacker. If this attempt fails, the other figure makes his own attempt and is, in his turn, the attacker. Excuse me. Multiple hand-to-hand combat. When 2 figures are on the ground in hand-to-hand combat, any other figures can move into that hex and join the brawl using option A or option J. What is option J? I don't see an option J. Okay. No die roll is required. Figures on the ground in hand-to-hand combat can only attack the enemies that they are in hand-to-hand combat with. They may attempt to disengage according to the disengagement rules below. If a standing figure attacks an enemy who is down in hand-to-hand combat with other figures and misses, then he rolls for each other enemy in the hand-to-hand combat, and then for each friend until he hits someone. Example, 2 goblins have engaged Ragnar in hand-to-hand combat. He can only attack them. He must pick one or the other, and they can both only attack him. Bjorn comes up with his sword and hacks at one of the goblins. His dex for the attack will be at a +4. Because the goblins is on the ground, it counts as a rear attack, plus Bjorn's other dex adjustments, if any. If Bjorn misses the goblin, he rolls again, same dex adjustment, to see if he hits the other goblin. If he misses again, he rolls the same adjustment to see if he hits Ragnar. See hitting your friends rule. If a missile or thrown weapon is aimed at a pile of figures in hand-to-hand combat, first roll to see if it hit. Then roll randomly to see who it hit. It is not a good idea to fire arrows into a brawl. Disengaging from hand-to-hand combat. A figure in hand-to-hand combat may not automatically disengage, but must pick option. The attempt to disengage. During the movement phase, it does not move since figures in hand-to-hand combat remain in the same hex. During its attack phase, it does not attack, but rolls 4 dice against adjusted dex. If successful, it immediately stands up and moves to an adjacent empty hex. It can take no other action that turn. And that's everything for hand-to-hand combat. So that's how the hand-to-hand grappling combat works, using daggers and whatnot, and a brief look at the strength table and how clubs and daggers work. I'll probably do an individual, another individual video on the strength stuff, and we'll keep continuing. Like the next one in here could be defending and dodging, or it could be something else that I pick out of the combat one. I'm just going over different sections, and eventually I'll cover the whole combat chapter. So until we all game again, guys, have a good day.